And today I'd like to have a chat with really one of my favorite of all FSO players, Wendi Hatton. Hi, Wendi.
Hello, Chris. Thanks for
Nice to
having
see you. You're one of my favorites, not only because you're a delightful person, but also because of one of the jobs you have, which when executed well, which you do, it makes my life so much easier, which is being the librarian of the orchestra. And I think it might interest our viewers to hear actually what being a librarian actually entails. It's not the same as being a librarian in a library. It's a normal library. It's a different sort of thing. And I think we could chat about that a little later. But I'd like to start just by asking you, actually, how long you've been in the symphony. I actually don't know.
Let's see. I started as a sub in about 1995, 1996, that particular season. I remember playing one of the bass clarinet parts to the Rite of Spring. That was a great experience for me. And so then eventually I became the second clarinet because the actual clarinetist moved away. So they moved me into the second chair place. So that's like almost like 24, 25 years ago. So that's a long time. That's longer than I was actually in the Navy. I played E-flat clarinet in the Navy band, and I was in the Navy band for 15 years. And that was about when I started with the Fairfax Symphony. There was 1 year overlap when I started Fairfax Symphony and retired from the Navy band. So it's been great.
Yeah. And in fact, you mentioned the Navy. As you know, a lot of our players actually play in the military bands in the capital. And in fact, our previous principal clarinetist, Adam Ebert, was also in the Navy. Was that not right? In the Navy band?
Actually, he replaced me. When I retired, he took over. And then I just had heard that he had been my replacement. I said, oh, wow, really good replacement for sure. And then we ended up in the Fairfax Symphony together. So that was a really kind of a full circle kind of a thing.
Right. And in fact, we'll talk a little bit later about the playing with your colleague as second clarinetist to first clarinetist and what that actually means. So when can you give us a little bit of your musical background, when you took up the clarinet, perhaps why you took up the clarinet?
Well, this is kind of funny. Well, first, I was in third grade when I started playing clarinet, which is 2 years earlier than they start the band instruments here in Fairfax County. So my parents, they were both musicians. My father was a percussionist. My mother was a vocalist. But I knew I didn't want to do either of those. I knew I wanted to do some kind of music. And so my school offered band instrument classes, but not strings. So I said, okay, let's see what I can just play as a wind instrument. So we go to the music store, and my parents said, okay, so you can either pick trumpet, flute, or clarinet. So trumpet was out for sure because it only had three. I didn't want to play just 3 notes. I wanted to play more than 3 notes. And then after they had told me, oh, you can play a lot of notes on trumpet, that still didn't make me want to play it. And I looked at flute. It didn't really register or it didn't connect. But when I saw that clarinet with all of those bright, shiny keys that can go all over the place, and the guy at the store played it for me and said, oh, that's what I want to play for sure. And then right after that, we went to kind of a football halftime show in the band that was nearby there. We were in California then. And during the halftime show, the clarinet section had this really beautiful, slow section, and all in the low register, and it sounded just so beautiful to me. And I said, yep, that's definitely what I'm going to play, clarinet for sure. So that was in third grade, and so that was a long time ago. So I've been playing clarinet ever since.
Well, it's true. I mean, I don't know. We actually interviewed Paul Johnson, who's our principal trumpet player, as you know. I think I won't tell him what you just said about the trumpet. But, it's interesting you mentioned that. Of course, I don't play the clarinet, but there's no doubt that it is. I think no doubt that it's the most facile of all the woodwind instruments in terms of the speed, at least you can play, maybe the flute also, but also the range. It's the widest range as well. And you mentioned, I know that I can see why you fell in love with the different registers it's beguiling, the low register and then the middle and the top. They're all quite different in terms of color.
Correct.
And I think that's why, it's such a significant instrument for the orchestra. One of my favorites too, as a conductor, that is.
No.
So, Wendi, let's talk a little bit about what it means to be second clarinetist, because I think, again, the viewers might be interested, not so much the sort of hierarchy of first versus second, but actually the collegial aspect maybe of playing second, what you feel are the responsibilities and maybe the challenge in a little bit too, from my experience of working with you. But if you would maybe say, maybe give us some insight as to those two things, that would be great.
Sure. I feel like playing second clarinet is like supportive for the first clarinet, and to be able to match the first clarinet perfectly, so you sound like one instrument but with two notes happening at the same time. That's what I've always strived to do, is to play together in tune with the principal player. And with Adam, we played together for 10 years, I think. And so I had been able to really know exactly where he was going to go. I could even tell when he was going to change a note, having played with him for so many years. So it's sort of like I follow him, but it's still exactly when he does it, if that makes any sense.
It makes, if I may interrupt for a second, it makes a huge amount of sense. And from my perspective, that's really valuable because, I've noticed finally over the years that, there's certain things which, so for instance, you mentioned playing, the aspect of playing sort of with the player, sort of into the sound of the player. I've noticed that, when a conductor tries to help or maybe fix intonation issues of tuning, that often it's actually to do with the balance of the instruments rather than the actual pitch itself. It's quite interesting. And I have to say, again, why you're one of my favorite people, and I think this is true, I'm not just trying to praise you, I've had so little problems with you and the clarinet section as a whole when it comes to intonation, because I always feel actually that the balance between the two instruments, Adam and you, or in the case of we have now a new principal, that the balance is such that actually it almost always sounds in tune. And that's really great. And it's been insightful for me to hear how that actually works.
Yes,
so, and also, as you say, when you play with someone for so long, again, something which helps me a lot is the business of playing together, obviously the ensemble being together. And I know that when players have played together as long as you have, as you just described it, the ensemble is rarely an issue because you know each other so well. Now, having said that, Wendi, you were with Adam for however many years it was, 10 or so at least, maybe 15. Now we have a brand new principal clarinetist.
Right.
He only had 1 year with us, and of course this year is, well, we'll have to see. Can you tell us what that is like? Last year was his first year with the orchestra. Right.
That's a really interesting question, because it's the opposite of with Adam. So now we're with the new principal, and the main thing is just knowing that he is such a fabulous musician that just our basic knowledge of music and clarinet playing just kind of makes the two of us play well together already, even though we've only played just a short time together, because just our knowledge on how to blend together. I think I've played with him a couple of times in some pay jobs that we've done, but actually playing orchestral music right next to each other was a first, because those were all like band recording type jobs that we did. So I just think that's just our overall ability to know what it sounds like to play with another clarinetist. We just kind of we got together. It was very quick for me to be able to play with him well and match with him well, just because just of our own backgrounds. Both of our backgrounds sort of brings us to that point where, okay, this is how we sound. And we even talked a little bit before the first rehearsal, just to give us a little idea. We played a few notes between the two of us just to see where we were pitch-wise on particular notes that tend to be out a little bit. So when we started that first rehearsal, it seemed like I had already played with him for a while, because we knew what each other was going to be doing and how our tendency was in particular notes that we would play. So it was a very easy transition for me, for sure, for both of us, actually.
Yeah, that's great. It looks like you get on pretty well, from what I can tell.
It's so funny.
And of course, he also has been in one of which, was he also Navy band?
No, Marine band.
He's Marine band, that's right. But he's been in that background, so I presume that also helps.
Mm.
So, Wendi, I don't know, you're presumably not unique in this, but I'm very impressed because I know not everyone does this, which is all the clarinets you have a mastery of, meaning you play, of course, B flat or A clarinet, the standard clarinet, but of course there's bass clarinet, which is a different animal, and the very high clarinet, the E flat clarinet. Is it not
Right.
true that you play all these instruments?
I do play all of them. It's good because it's all the same fingering. It's just a different embouchure. Clarinet is small, so you have to have a small, tighter embouchure. The bass clarinet is the largest, so you're loosening it up a little bit. But all the fingerings are the same. It's a matter of how much you spread your fingers to the larger.
But again, if I may embarrass you again, another reason I love you so much is because I have come across in my time clarinetists who will only play the B flat. They will not look at the E flat. They abhor the bass clarinet. It's beneath them. As you will play all these, and you seem to love them all.
Yes, I played E flat clarinet in college and the Navy band, so I was very experienced at playing the E flat clarinet as well, and the bass as well in college. Not at all in the Navy band. But so I have had experience on all the instruments, and I enjoy all of it. I love it. Love playing all of them.
That is great. I've interviewed a few players who've had more than one job, as it were. Mm-hmm. And in your case, of course, you've got another job, which is the librarian of the orchestra, which is, if I may say, underrated, no doubt underpaid, and a most indispensable job. I mean, as I was saying earlier, for me, to be able to have a workable library and a librarian who knows what they're doing is crucial. I don't know if everyone knows, but obviously I'll just preface this by saying that, all the music that we have comes from the library. We either have it within our library or we rent, and of course you make that happen. You rent the music, and if it's something we buy, you put it in our library, and you are of course responsible for marking the parts. I don't want to steal your thunder here. Maybe you could tell our viewers what that job is in essence.
Actually, yes, I can tell you. Well, first, I started the year before your audition season. So we've been I've been a librarian for the whole time that you've been the conductor. And I remember when your concert was the last season, I remember thinking, wow, if Chris gets hired, we're going to be, he's really good at communicating. And so this is going to be really a good situation, because anytime I would call him or email him, he would immediately get back to me. So I said, okay, if he gets hired, this is going to be a good thing.
Well, very, very kind.
But mainly I enjoy it because I get to know all of the orchestra members, because I'm, going up and giving them their music, talking to them. And my kids, my kids who are now adults, went through the whole Fairfax County strings program. So they went to like the different district band or district orchestra events and things. And so people like Ann Rupert and other people that are in the Fairfax Symphony, like my son took from Greg Rupert in school. So I had a connection between my kids and the string players in the orchestra. So I already knew them before I even became a librarian. So that makes it easier when you know the people and you look at a list and say, okay, this person plays this particular instrument. And if I hadn't known any of the people, it would have been really hard to get it going, and remembering who was who. It's a lot you have to remember. So getting the music out is the main important part of the job, in the right order, especially with the strings and they have to do their bowings and everything. You said I have to mark the music. I actually don't. I have to, the string players actually mark their music based on the principle of their sections.
Let me qualify what I meant, Wendi. Actually, was to do more with you and me. When you will recall, I know you will, because of the amount of time it took. There have been a number of times where I've had to change the orchestration of the piece a little bit, because we might be missing a few instruments. We've had this with the Nutcracker. We once had this very near the beginning of my time, I think my second year or even first year, when we did a concert out, a summer concert in Shenandoah. I had to rearrange the music a little bit, which meant writing in taking apart from the bassoon and putting it in the trombone or whatever it might be.
Right.
A thankless task, it must be said.
Oh, yes.
But then, of course, you would have to I'd do the changing, but you would do the copying in the parts. And
correct.
Or the copying of the parts and putting in this, that. All kind of when I said earlier, underrated, sort of grunt work, which is no fun, but absolutely crucial. That's what I meant by copying, not the bowings. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay, right. Yeah, that's true.
And we have, maybe you could talk a little bit about, and I know it gets my blood boiling a bit when it comes to publishers, but maybe what an orchestra has to deal with in terms of music being in copyright and not in copyright, owning it versus renting it.
Right.
Could you speak a little bit to that?
Sure. There's music that has to be rented because it's not public domain at the time. So all the music that we own in the symphony is all public domain and can be copied and sent off to the musicians and everything. And with rentals, you have to be really careful that they're not public domain. And then we have to make sure the musicians dispose of all of any kind of bowings or anything that they had to do just to make it compliant with the rules of all the different publishers. And they're really strict about when they want the music back. So I have to make sure I tell the people, this is rental music. Try not to make too many hard, dark marks on it, and then get it back to me on time so I can get it back so the symphony doesn't get charged. And so sometimes it can get a little harrowing if someone isn't really aware of how important it is to get this music back. And so I'm waiting, so I have to send these emails. Do you have your music? Do you please? So that part, it gets a little bit challenging, a little bit, but all in all, all the publishers always get their music back at the right time. And it helps because at the end of each concert, people just leave their music on the stand so that I can just pick it up after the concert. But sometimes people leave, some of the string players especially, who play in the inside, they share music. So they have some music that's at home that they didn't remember to get back to me. So sometimes I have to sort of nudge them a little bit to get it back. But overall, it always ends up all right. I just have to plan ahead. That's the biggest thing about being a librarian. You have to plan way ahead to avoid any mishaps or anything that would cause.
Oh, absolutely. And when I start planning a season, which is obviously way ahead, you're one of the first people, of course, I collaborate or talk to or communicate with. Mm-hmm. Because I have to find out, actually, whether we have the music, whether, as you say, it's in copyright or public domain, and the costs associated therewith, because, of course, it's all within a budget. And music isn't cheap, usually. It varies quite considerably. Right. I think people might think, the price is to do with the size of the piece or the length of the piece. Actually, that correlation isn't so obvious. Mm-hmm. Sometimes pieces, it's really to do with the publisher. For instance, I happen to know French music is often very, very expensive. You know, even a little piece by, say, Maurice Ravel, which is still under copyright, a piece which may be only 5 minutes long can cost $1,000. And yet, you know, a big orchestral piece by Brahms, which is now in public domain, costs considerably less than that. Yeah.
Considerably, yes. Yeah.
So, Wendi, I'd like to, if I could just change tack a little bit here. You know, obviously, this year has been a pretty, in some ways, terrible year so far. The pandemic, of course, being the center of that mess. But also, as you know, the racial relations in this country particularly has really come to a boil. And it's brought kind of a, I think, certainly due spotlight on the arts in general. And obviously, I'd like us to talk about the orchestra and performing arts as to the diversity or lack of within an orchestra. And now, maybe it's rather late, but we are certainly, the whole field is trying to address this issue seriously and for the future. And I'm wondering if you have any insights or maybe your thoughts about the whole business, and maybe some advice or just some insights on how you feel this whole thing
the
is.
Symphony and African Americans. That's what you're asking, right?
Yes, I specifically African Americans.
Okay. Well, so growing up, when I was in elementary school, we lived in California in a little town called Bloomington, and it seemed like we were the only Black family in the whole town. It was definitely predominantly white. And so, you know, my parents, they were musicians. And so I started playing clarinet, and all the bands I was in, I was always the only one. My brother and I went to our elementary school. We were the only two in the whole school, even though my father was the principal there. So that was interesting. That was interesting, having my father being the principal and his two kids being the only African American. It was very interesting. But as far as the band moving up to middle school, we moved to another town that's more diverse in Riverside, California. So I was able to play my instrument with other people more like me. But then growing up, then we moved to the East Coast in my senior year in high school. And then it was even more like the Washington, D.C. area, that was even more diverse. So compared to how it was at the beginning of when I played to now, I think we've come a long way. However, there does need to be some more diversity in orchestras. I really agree. I'm not sure if you've heard of the Sphinx organization. They started it back in 1996. They support and encourage Latino and Black young musicians. And I think that they have really been something that has catapulted the whole idea about having African Americans play in orchestras, because every once in a while you do see more and more playing in an orchestra. And I'm just thinking, just in our case for Fairfax Symphony, it might be a good idea if we could perform works that were actually written by African Americans. And there are several good composers of orchestral music written by African Americans, and it might be something that could draw that particular demographic to our concerts. That's a good possibility that might happen. And in terms of just being in the orchestras, if it might be good if we could actually go to some Black schools, even if there aren't any in Fairfax County, just some, maybe in DC somewhere, the UDC or somewhere, that could get some kind of interest in us, that would sort of actually bring possibly some people towards our Fairfax Symphony, even if we have some auditions again, like put a notice out to those Black schools, just to have people come out and audition, just so they can have an opportunity to maybe actually get accepted into the orchestra.
Yeah, I mean, I think that last idea is very good. We could, you know, as you know, we have, well, except for possibly this September because of the pandemic, but we normally have in September a whole bunch of auditions for the orchestra.
Hmm.
if they're openings, of course, or for subs, meaning people who join the roster in case we can call upon them. I don't think we've ever actually pinpointed a specific area, like maybe well, not only a school or a university, but you're right. As you say, a black school or black university, that would be a good idea to actually advertise specifically to get
Hmm.
people to come. You
That'd
know,
be,
it's funny you met the outreach side of what you were saying too. I actually did a concert quite recently with the American Youth Philharmonic. I used to be the artistic director,
hmm.
and we actually I went back as a guest, and we did a concert at the Duke Ellington School of the Arts. That would be a great place to do some outreach.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And you know, since I've had more time on my hands, and because of, I guess, this explosion, you know, this racial tension which has really come to a boil right now, I have been looking into a number of pieces by African American or black composers. And you're right. I mean, there are quite a few, and I am hoping that we will begin. I don't just want to do it all at once. That
Hmm.
seems like just a token gesture, but to gradually, you know, infiltrate it more into the repertoire that we play over the coming years. So I do have that in my mind.
Oh, that's great. And then in the marketing, I guess when they're marketing the different concerts, just talk about this is we're doing our first performance by an African American composer. So it'll bring some of the African Americans to the concert.
Yeah, some attention brought actually to that very point. Yeah,
for sure.
that's great. Well, thanks for your insight on that, Wendi. That's good. And we also have this is probably not the place to talk about it right now, but we at the Symphony within the administration we actually have a project or two to also help start diversifying the actual orchestra. So I'm hoping in the years to come that will happen. So
Great.
let's hope.
Yeah.
So finally, can I ask, just to change tack again, Wendi, is there a favorite composer or a favorite piece that you want to tell us about? I don't know.
My favorite composer, I would say, is Copland. Appalachian Spring, like I played Appalachian Spring for a month in Germany. Like for 30 days we played Appalachian Spring, and I did that's a bunch of solos and that was a wonderful experience. So I put Copland way up there at the top, and Mahler.
You
Copland
didn't
and
get
Mahler.
tired of it after 30 days. That's good.
Right.
We actually, it's funny you mentioned Copland, because as you will remember, we, as a guest artist, we hired Ricardo Morales, the principal clarinet of Philadelphia, to play the Copland Concerto with us.
All right.
Which is a beautiful piece. It's interesting for a conductor, that piece, because, as you know, the first movement is so beautiful, beautiful sort of endless melody, soft string music. And then the second movement is the complete opposite. I mean, fast and
it was crazy,
incredibly rhythmic and incredibly difficult to play,
yeah.
particularly the strings of the orchestra. And never fun to rehearse because everyone gets so frustrated because it's so hard. You know? But what a great piece that is. Appalachian Spring is second to none. I agree.
Yes.
So would you be willing to play? I think you mentioned the Mozart. I know it's very close to your heart. Would you be willing to play part of that?
I could play the opening of the slow movement of the quintet, of the Mozart quintet.
That would be fantastic, Wendi. Thank you very much.